And unlike my previous time when I was a consultant, I found myself dipping in and out of new industries and new problem spaces constantly. But when you're working inside of an enterprise, you are not only needing to be an expert on the design process or what your users' needs are, but you're thinking about, well, what's the fundamental nature of that problem that your users are facing. And so I've gone as far as I can on my own reading papers, but really the power has come from the conversations I've had with my posse that I've built around me in terms of experts in lots of different fields, epidemiologists, policy experts, marketers, everything from urban planners, geospatial data analysts. There's been so many people that I've had conversations with, which I'm surprised in a way that it's been so easy to reach out and have these conversations, even though we're all working from home. But it's really been that networking and finding those voices of expertise that have helped me start to feel like I have a handle on the work that I'm supposed to be doing in leading Mimesis's design efforts. So I'll leave it at that. I hope that it wasn't too long or too short, but thank you guys so much for listening. If you are curious about Mimesis, you can just check us out at mimesis.technology. And yeah, I hope you have some questions and hope I didn't go on for too long. Thanks.
Yeah, Alex, that was really, really good. Thank you for that. It's a really fascinating time to be in the middle of doing a startup, right? Like there's so many pressures and challenges going on at the moment. So it's a really, really, really interesting time. I'm really interested by being a startup in AI and having to think about things like ethics and ethical concerns around AI. How much has that played into the thinking when you're talking about, which way you're going to focus?
The main thing I think that we're thinking about at the moment is in thinking through not only about the immediate user of the analysis that we're supporting, but thinking about the people that we are helping to do analysis on, I guess, effectively. So one of the use cases that we really talked a lot about this was when we're looking at how we might model the likelihood that someone or that a population has COVID but might be asymptomatic. So on one hand, that would be brilliant, because if you could say, oh, this area, if COVID did break out, then it would be more likely that there would be asymptomatic cases, so you could focus your testing there. But we spent a lot of time thinking through and talking with the people that we were looking at. So in this case, we were looking specifically at health industry workers. And so we actually just reached out to people in nursing specifically to say, what if we could give you this kind of analysis of your business, your colleagues, and that kind of thing. And we learned a lot about what the pitfalls of that approach might be and how we could do it in a way that was more ethical. So I think it sounds obvious, but I really think that talking to the people, nothing about us without us. I think talking to the people that you're doing work about, I think is really one of the best ways that we've started to think about the ethics, aside from just kind of immersing ourselves in the topic and keeping it front of mind in all of our conversations.
Yeah. I mean, how did you recruit nurses? How did you find recruitment of nurses? Was that difficult or challenging? Or
in this case, we went through kind of professional contacts. We have a team our team has about 11 people, and like I said, they're from lots of different backgrounds, and so that was the way that we reached out to friends and family in that way.
Yeah, cool. Has there been any other particular challenges you found with the AI and building that tech that you weren't anticipating when you started out?
I mean, I think that, like I said, there's this conversation as a designer. There's this constant conversation between, what it should do and what it could do with the technical people, and for them, it's always, oh yeah, we could do that. We could do that. It's trivial. That's no problem. And so I think just the importance of specifying and designing the question that we're trying to answer before we spend all of our time on getting the data and starting to analyze it is, I think, one of the other big lessons that we've learned there. In my mind, I thought that the technical building of the AI would be the hardest bit, but I think the actual finding what's the real question you're trying to answer is actually harder.
Yeah, that's right, isn't it? That actual question of what are you trying to answer, and what is the problem statement to begin with is always the first thing, right? But it's that research piece, talking to people and humans, that's always the best thing to do. I like talking to humans.
Yeah, same.
Thank you very much for your talk. I really appreciated it. Oh, hang on, I might just have one.
There's a question from anonymous attendee.
Yeah, could you give an example of how you looked at technical regulations and worked out how it impacted the user's decisions making, etc.? You showed a spreadsheet of them. Could you please pick one? I guess I'm asking you to tell us a story.
Yeah, sure. Oh, thank you for asking me to tell a story.
Thank you, Anonymous.
Yeah, the way that we've been, so I'm not sure, or I'll just assume that you're not very familiar with the planning regulation, or the development approval process and the urban planning guidelines in the state of Victoria. But one that I might choose, let's see here. Well, I'd have to pull up my spreadsheet probably to get into much more detail. But I think one of the difference, for example, of what we're thinking about is from a technical perspective, a lot of what we're trying to do when we evaluate a proposal is the way we're looking at it is, does it fit within the maximum allowable building envelope defined by the code? So that's one of the things that we were doing, is just saying, well, what's the best way to synthesize all of these linear measurements? For example, is it offset this far from the street? Is it this high? Does it overshadow or overlook the neighboring sites? And so then that means you need to have diagonal sort of volumes cut away from that. But eventually you end up with this volume that you can say, well, if the building fits inside of that, then it meets all the rules. So that's one of the key things, is just sort of thinking about how can we synthesize some of these rules into a tool that then the user can look at and make an intuitive decision. But the other thing that we realized was that technically it was going to be difficult for us to ensure that every bit of that assessment was perfect, given that especially the model coming in from the end user may not be perfectly formatted. It may not fit perfectly into our framework. And so one of the big changes that we've made in our thinking is shifting from a kind of automation mindset, that we're going to try to automate this whole process, to now we're thinking about how can we highlight points of risk in the application so that a planner would say, focus on this part that looks like it's not within the guidelines, as opposed to saying, definitely robot says it's in or it's out. Right. So the metaphor we're using is actually a bit more like a spell checker, right? This word looks like it's misspelled. We don't recognize it. Or this grammar looks funny to the computer. Same with the plans, so that the planner can then say, oh, I might go and focus on checking the compliance of that part of the drawing. So I think that's another big way that we've thought about how do we assist this decision, by helping them focus in on the parts that may not be compliant, as opposed to trying to automate it on their behalf. I think that hopefully that's a good example of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that was a great example. I've got another question from Brianna, which is, what are your biggest fears when the product launches, and what is your strategy post-launch in terms of testing, validating, and evolving the MVP?
I mean, I think we're still working on our strategy pre-launch for testing, validating. So we're really focused there right now. We are hoping to, what I'm working on right now actually is recruiting planners from a number of different councils around Australia. One of our team members is a former planner, and so he has a big network in the industry, and he's got a lot of people that have signed up to be part of our posse, so to speak, people who are interested in new tools to help make their jobs easier. So that's one of the big things, is kind of focusing there on that user advocacy. So not just, I mean, if this is potentially a tool that say is useful within council and saves council time on how long it takes for them to approve an application. I think some people would argue, well, then we should go to leaders within council and just worry about whether they'll buy it or not. But part of our strategy is not only to focus on that kind of technical or financial buyer, but to think about who is the actual user and how can we get word of mouth and advocacy within that community to help drive organic spread of the product.
It's exciting and challenging and scary and terrifying and wonderful all at the same time.
So yeah, in terms of like what's the scariest thing, I think probably one of the scariest things is that it'll just take longer to build, and that we might, burn up the goodwill of these people who have signed up to participate. So one of the things we're doing to try and mitigate that risk is we're not yet signing them up kind of officially as a council, so to speak, to a process of any kind yet. We're going directly to these planners through, like I said, that professional network, and treating them like research participants, as opposed to going through their managers and that sort of thing.
Yeah, cool. And Geeta said thank you. She didn't realize she hit anonymous. Thank you very much for speaking tonight, Alex. Really appreciate it. That was really awesome. I hope it goes really well. I'm looking forward to hearing more updates as you keep treading the scary and exciting path of startup world.
Great. Yeah, thanks. And thanks for all of your great questions, everyone. If you do want to reach out, or if this sounds like the kind of project you'd like to stay in touch with, please just find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.